that was quite extraordinary, I have to say. I mean, that the outburst and the kinds of things that were said, I would never in a million years have expected that to have happened, not only in the National Assembly, but certainly not around someone that we all know to be as distinguished a personality as you are. But let me say this.
Charles, before you say that,
sure,
because it's important that you said what you said. You know what? This is what women go through largely when the camera is not on in some of our public spaces. The culture of silencing the woman who wants to say, what has been done to me is not proper, is one that has attained a pattern of behavior. It was that pattern of behavior you saw on display. The only difference is that cameras could pick it up. So I want to use this opportunity to say that this I consider to be one of the distractions that the Senate wants for the purpose of ignoring the persistent call that what Senator Poti Uduaghan needs is fair hearing. Have you not observed how since the matter of this sexual harassment was alleged by her against the Senate president, they have not addressed that matter? They have done every other thing around it, thrown words, thrown statements, done all kinds of things. I want the country, I want the nation, I want the public to please ignore whatever happened at the Senate. We now see an indication of what we should be addressing as part of our systemic change. But I want us to not put our eyes away from a woman, a senator, elected by her own people, who then said that the origin of the problem that we all first saw on the floor of the Senate was actually not about seat allocation. It was that all of that happened as the consequence of having rebuffed the sexual advance that was made toward her. As an important country in the world, what we all must agree is that such a material piece of information in our public space can only be addressed through an independent investigation of the allegation. It has to be addressed through a fair hearing, and if the petitioner who signed on her behalf is saying, I am not guaranteed that fair hearing here today, it shouldn't have been a basis for the Senate to try to use the games of the rules of the Senate, which, by the way, they apply inconsistently. The rules of the Senate are subordinate to the Constitution and the laws of the land. Right. So today we saw a repeat of what happened to Senator Natasha Apoti when she dared to use the process of the rules to say, under Order 10, I have to be heard.
Unfortunately, a lot of people, in spite of your call, will focus on what happened today because, I mean, as much as it is shocking, it is to a lot of people some form of perverse entertainment. So they will sort of take it on. But the hope is that in the process of taking it on, it'll draw attention to the point that you were making, which you say is the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the way that women are treated. And unfortunately, you didn't actually get the opportunity to do what you came there to do today.
Well, you know, they had a destination and wanted to get there. The most successful thing that we were able to do today is to not allow them railroad the petitioner on behalf of Natasha into a kind of organized process that would lead to them saying, we find what you're saying to not match any standard of evidence.
But I mean, they've adjourned till when?
Well, you have to have been there, because what they said is that they cannot touch the matter any further because it has gone to the courts. Now, what has gone to the courts? What they have done is to make Senator Natasha now a defendant on a case filed by somebody she never mentioned in the course of her allegation against the Senate president. So you can see clearly that what the Senate has basically decided to organizationally do is to silence this woman permanently and to dismiss the issue that is so important for our democracy to address in as if it were just an unserious matter, which was why they started off by telling us that we don't do unserious.
And do you think they're likely to succeed in that quest, well, you allege?
I believe that as much as the Senate has grossly violated the Constitution, almost in a habitual kind of way, by simply not respecting that Senate rules are, the Constitution and the laws of the land are higher order than their internal rules. You know, in the United States, they have Senate rules, but the United States Senate does not consider the Senate rules. The rules are rules to guide the way they do their business. There is no way that rules can become superior to the Constitution and the laws. So what we saw was basically a determination to shut us down by saying you are, in fact they used it, they said exactly that. And it was, it was in a conversation. The person who, there were different degrees of the behavior of the senator, the senator today. There were different degrees of it coming from different senators. There were some other senators that were, very, very professional in the way they responded to our dialogue. But what became very obvious is that the idea that we as a people are so easily swayed by the superior powers of the people that hold the levers of authority in our public institutions.
And people
that needs
who
to end.
Voted in by the people, ostensibly.
Well, I'm glad you used the word ostensibly, because I would be surprised if we did a proper audit of our electoral process and our elections, whether the number of people who would come out clean as having been voted and therefore holding the legitimacy of the citizens is actually significant, as we would hope. But one person whose legitimacy we are not in doubt at all about? It is Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan.
Meanwhile, there's a recall petition against her from some of her constituents. Yes. I mean, whether it's orchestrated or whether it is something else, we don't know at this point. But I wonder if you've been in touch with her and what her sort of mind frame is at the moment.
I find that young woman heroic. She simply is the example of what we need our daughters to be in terms of having a very clear mind on seeking for the justice that is due her. She is not a shrinking violet by any description. So Natasha has vowed that she has to fight on until she is heard properly according to the rules of the rule of law. She believes that what has happened is that she's been made victim many times over. Now for us, as reasonable citizens, we don't know the veracity of what she alleges. I have been persistent in saying that. But what we all agree as reasonable people is that she made an allegation.
They must be investigated.
They must be independent.
And to be seen to be fair.
In fact, we said, let there be an independent investigation accompanying the session. In fact, what her petitioner asked, a very important part of it, was that they needed to constitute a panel, a committee that would focus on this, because it is an extraordinary situation. They don't have, the committee that would have done this has smeared itself in many ways by taking the public stance of not investigating, yet saying you are lying. What you're saying is not credible, or we don't believe you. Shut up. They swore by the Senate president. How do you do that as a public institution of law? The highest lawmaking organ of our country fails to be compliant with the law in the approach that they have taken.
So how do you think, I mean, she said, as you pointed out there, that she's in it to the end. In other words, she's going to fight to the finish. Beyond that, which people often say in sort of public arena, because obviously they do feel aggrieved enough to take the fight all the way to the end. I mean, do you think this disagreement can be resolved in any other way?
This is not a disagreement. This is a serious allegation.
I understand that.
Yes, and I believe that.
But in other words, if there is some kind of, because I mean there is an allegation which is at the heart of it, but on top of that allegation, there've now been various disagreements, and if that can be resolved to create a more conducive environment for those allegations to be properly investigated,
I think that's
what I'm.
Yes, I get that. So I think that the first thing is that Nigerians must send a very strong signal to our senators, to our lawmakers in general, that the behavior of the senators, the Senate president, the institution, toward a matter of this kind has completely degraded the way that our country is perceived. And that therefore, we as a people are saying